So this is the first time I'm telling this story. So just bear with me a bit. I guess in the last couple of years, I've been working on a book project to go around the world and to get to the limits of human experience in all directions. So to live in the most difficult, the most challenging, the most dangerous places, and feel what it feels like to stand in the shoes of somebody who is completely opposite of me. And I guess this story started in a way at the White House last time, and we were sitting there, I guess, trying to figure out why don't people travel? Why don't Americans travel? I mean, what is the deal? And we got a bunch of different answers, but one that sort of interested me is that the world is just a dangerous place. Why would you want to leave America? It's the rest of the world is completely dusty, isolated. Just look at the news. It's all very scary. And during some of just the side conversations of just talking to people and trying to understand this, they said the big thing is this, it's terrorism. We have to create a defining, an organizing principle to figure out who we're trying to fight. The big problem is when we keep defining it, it keeps changing, and we keep defining it, and at some point we'll figure out sort of what this is, and then we'll be able to, I guess, destroy it, be a sort of happy world, if you will. But so that bothered me a bit, and I said, well, that kind of sounds like we're creating enemies here. Has anybody asked why everybody wants to kill us? And I was promptly told, you don't say that here. This is the White House. I was like, okay, yep, fine, got it, sorry, left my filter home again, organizing principle, got it. But it really still bugged me for a while, who is this person that we don't know, that, we want to sort of describe what we're sort of fearful of. And about this time, talking to my dad, who is a pretty conservative guy, and I had a career in management consulting for about 10 years, and just got to the point where it consumed me, and I felt like I wasn't getting the type of experiences I needed to, and I quit my job, and he was really, really, really happy with that. And my dad is a guy who is absolutely, totally convinced, I think, that immigrants are the cause of all his unhappiness, and Muslims are the cause of all his insecurities. And these are things I could not really ever talk to my dad about. So one of the things he said is I was like, I'm working on a book, and he's like, I won't read it. I will not read your book if it's about Muslims. And I said, well, I don't know. It's about all kinds of people, Dad. It's about Palestinians and Kurds and Saudis and all that stuff. And he's like, okay, they're not Muslims. And that's all right. So, as part of this, I was like, let me just get to find out what I am so afraid of, and how do I get to the center of anger? Where is the center of this? So I, look in the Middle East, and we have, of course, ISIS out there. Certainly a entire society of terrorists, if you will. And I started looking at the news, and they're entirely focused on destroying and wiping out the Yazidi. I'm like, who are these Yazidi? So I start researching who these Yazidi are, because if our mortal enemy is trying to kill somebody else, I'm definitely going to find evil there. And I went out there, and I started looking up, and these Yazidi are a sect, or a religion, really, and a lot of people would say the oldest organized religion, something like 5,000 years old, and we're talking way before Jesus, way before Abraham, way before the Tower of Babel. This was a religion, and it survived in the center of all of this conflict all these years. So I was just kind of curious. I was like, well, I wonder if that can teach us something about living in the middle of anger. And I was like, all right, so I got to get there. Let me sort of figure this out. And Googling, like, is it safe to travel in Iraq? Got some very interesting things back, right? Like, common knowledge is Iraq is one of the most dangerous places in the world. And I'm like, that doesn't help me if I'm traveling there, but thanks. Obviously, State Department warnings. There's a suicide bomb going off every day, targeting Westerners. Okay, got it. Like, trying to find something more specific. I find a newspaper an article that maps out all the different terrorist organizations and all the different acronyms, and this one's fighting that one, and these two work together to kill this one, but if that one's defeated, then they fight each other, and this one only likes this one if this one likes this one back first. And I'm like, okay, it's a reputable news organization, so I'll go with this. So I had nothing else, so I went out there to Iraq, flew out there in the middle of the night. And got a taxi from Erbil to Duhok, and right in the middle of that is Mosul, which I don't think it is anymore, but was the ISIS-controlled sort of area, and we're sort of like skirting around there in the middle of the night, and I finally get to Duhok, and I didn't get anything online because I was like really nervous. I wanted to check out the hotel, and I get there, and I go up there, and I was like, all right, this will work. Do you have any availability? And he's like, yeah, the last person that was here checked out a few days ago. So yeah, we do have availability. Like, any room is open. I'm like, this is promising. I can negotiate the rate here. So he's like, I'll put you in this room. Like, it's on the corner. It's like facing the intersection. Like, I'll like glass everywhere. I'm like, hell no, like, don't put me there. Like, bomb goes off, like, I was like, just give me something like without windows facing the street, please. Whatever. And he's like, well, we have like room A's, but like it doesn't have any windows, and we've been using it as a storage closet, but I can put you in there. I'm like, yes, just put me in there. Like, I'm just whatever, it's safer. So he puts me in there, and I'm like in Iraq, and I'm just like in my little bomb shelter, and having these nightmares over and over ever since I decided to do this, to just like really sort of find out what I fear. Just having nightmares about terrorists just like breaking down the door and coming into my room, and just like, that's it. It's like you put up your hands or whatever, and then some bad things happen after that, right? So I keep having this nightmare almost every night, and I'm like I just need to like figure out what's happening. I'm like going crazy. So I go to the front desk, and I was like, what's going on here? Everybody looks like normal. I can't really figure out what's going on here. And I showed him the little flow chart and whatever, and he's like, that's not happening here. He's like, what? I'm like, what? He's like, no, there's like, what even are those acronyms? Like, that just, like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, this is Kurdistan. Like, it's fine. Like, just go walk around. Like, everybody loves you. You're American. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. This doesn't really make sense. So I go down to the market, and I find this kid, or I see all these little kids like selling gum, if you will. And, I'm like, let me just like test this and figure it out. And, I go up to him, and I kind of like, nudge him, like, or I make a motion, and I'm like, yeah, I want some gum. And, it's something like 20 cents Iraqi, if you will. And like, I see all the other kids, like, sort of eyeing this, like, and I know as soon as I buy this gum, like, they're gonna jump on me. And I'm like, okay, so I take the gum, and I give him, like, I don't know, the equivalent of a quarter, just keep the change, and let me get out of here. And like, I scoot out the market, I start walking, and the kid starts chasing me. And he's like, hey, and then they had some friends, and they start walking with him, and we start walking faster and faster. And we end up sort of getting back to the hotel, and I'm like sprinting, and I get there and I'm fine, and I look down and he's like still standing there outside my hotel, and I'm like, I don't want any more gum. Like, what am I scared of? So like I go down there ready to bust open the door and like just tell the kid, like, just get the hell out of here, like go home, like I told you to keep the change. And I go down there and like whip open the door, and he's like, your change. Like, and I'm like, are you serious? Like, you chased me all the way back and to give me my change. Just take it, kid. Like, just take it. And he's like, he was like, I don't get it. He's like, it's your change, and it's not mine. So what do you want me to do with it? I'm like, just take it. And he's like, and he sat there and he's like, he looked at me, looking at the change, and he just started crying. And he's like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, and I'm like, all right, well, you know, he just needs to learn a lesson and take the change. So I like close the door and go back up and like wait a little while, and he stands there for a while, and he ends up like looking over his shoulder and just dropping the change on the step of the hotel, and like walks off. And I was just like, wow, like maybe I sort of misread these people. All right, so I like start talking to people, and I go and try to figure out who these Yazidi are, the devil worshippers, and I go and I'm like, I've read all the documentation on you guys or whatever, and I have all these books, and the Yazidi devil worshippers and the crazy peacock cult of Iraq, and they're like, and this is the PR people I'm talking to, and they're like, oh yeah, that was the wrong thing to say to us, right? Because, and they're like, you damn journalists and all of that. I'm like, journalist? Like, no, I'm a travel writer, actually. Like, no, I'm not a journalist. And I was like, okay, we'll like talk to you. And we start talking or whatever, and I'm like, tell me stuff about like this religion, and I mean, some principles about like there's never light without a shadow, and some other things, which are quite interesting. But now I really want to know about this devil, right? And so I'm like, well, what about this, devil, like that everybody sort of hates you for? And it's like conversation over, like get out, right? And I'm like, well, do you have anybody I can like stay with and understand, and like, maybe it's just misinterpreted or whatever? And they're like, nope, conversation over. So I'm like, okay, so how do I get out to these devil worshippers to figure out like who they actually are? I have to get like permission from the government of Iraq to actually like go there. And I talked to him, and I'm like, I don't understand this ISIS thing. Like, what is the deal? Like, it's an entire like terrorist society that doesn't make sense to me. Like, how do you keep everybody together? How do they actually like have an infrastructure, an economy, and all of that stuff? And he's like, look, they keep everybody in fear. They tell people what they want. What will scare them, what will, keep them doing what they want. And I'm like, why don't people just run away? Like, and he's like, oh yeah, like the people that try to run away, like come back like dismembered, and barely recognizable. And their family is usually thrown off the roof in order to, keep everybody on the understanding to keep this going. I'm like, this sounds horrible. I don't understand like how this could actually even work. And he said they keep them focused by having an enemy, by having an organizing principle, if you will, and it's the killing these Yazidis. And as long as they're trying to kill them, like they don't pay attention to the sort of bad things that are going around them. So I finally like get permission. He gives me permission. Actually, the other thing with that is like I went in there and I'm like, okay, so I'm a travel writer, I'd like to go visit. And he's like, this isn't a joke, kid. Like, these people are getting killed. Like, and, there's as soon as, like, if the military, is holding back the floodgates, and if ISIS gets to these people, like, they're going after them first. Like, they want to, like, erase every memory of them from the planet. They've destroyed their holy books, destroyed their temples, all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, oh, did I say travel writer? No, I'm a journalist. I'm a journalist. And so he finally gives me permission. I actually go out there and stay with these people, and like they are some of the like most interesting like people I've ever met. Some of the most intelligent like children I've ever met. Like having conversations with me that I would not expect a 9-year-old to be able to have. And I started like asking like, what's the devil? Like, and I'm pretty much told like, don't ask. And I finally like talked to this guy, and he was an elder, and he like kicks me off, and he like talks to me, and he's like, look, the Yazidi were like way before the big three religions. When the three religions split off, they each wanted to have a different relationship with God. So they each speak three different interpersonal languages. So they don't actually understand that they're all pointing at the same place. And they don't understand that nothing that we say is actually like conflicting with them. I'm like, okay, he's talking to me like, what's the devil? And he's like, it's not translatable. And I'm thinking, okay, that's not a no, which is the first time like I've actually heard this. So I'm like, what actually is it? So he's like, it's a, in a sense, the devil is inside, right? We're all capable of doing evil things. We're all capable of making those decisions, and if we don't understand that, and we try to pretend we're all good, we project that out into the world, and we go find the devil in other people in order to prove that we're good. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that. I don't know what that means, but like that seems completely reasonable, and that's absolutely, that's not worshiping the devil at all. Like, how could an entire organization, society, get focused on killing people for just a word? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. And so like I got there and I was like, well, I'm not going to find evil here. And then I started like thinking like maybe I'm just like too focused on finding evil in order to appreciate the people around me. And I still, we had just like an awesome like campfire and under the stars and just talking to people. And I had a nightmare that night, and it was the same damn nightmare of people like busting in my room. And I was like, wait a second, like I'm sleeping in a UN tent, like there's no door, like so I got you, like this is not real. And I reacted differently, like to when they busted my door down, and I was like, all right, well I got this, like and they were like, yeah, put your hands up, and I was like, guys, I've been expecting you, like thanks for coming. I was wanting to talk to you, and the terrorists in the dream just like they stopped. They was just like, I don't understand, like you didn't react like the way I wanted. So I was like, that's really like weird that happened, and I was like, well, that's kind of like weird that I'm trying to figure out like what imaginary people are actually like doing in my dream. So I should just like, what on earth is going on? Like am I delusional? Like I'm hearing helicopters, bombs going off. Like I'm just not sleeping, but it was weird that this dream was different. So I go back and I'm like, this is done. Like I just can't find, I can't find evil. And I was like, well, there's one other thing I need to try, and I just really need to sit down with a terrorist, like somebody. And I talked to my fixer. I had a few fixers that I worked with, and I was like, you have to like, can you sneak me over to ISIS territory in the middle of the night to talk to somebody to understand what that perspective looks like and sneak me back? And he's like, it's suicide, you can't do it. And I was like, do you know any people like who like can give me that perspective? And he's like, you know what they're doing to journalists like who do this? And I'm like, I'm not a journalist, I'm a travel writer. And can you do it or not? I mean, you're a fixer, like that's your job, like to make this work. And he's like, I got a guy, he's an expert in terrorism. He reads all the news articles every day. And I'm like, I'm just tired of experts actually right now. Like that doesn't work for me. Like do you have like the real thing? And he's like, fine, and he's like, well, I can dress him up like one and like parade him around. And I was like, no, that doesn't work for me. And he's like, oh, the other news organizations do that. Like, are you a journalist or whatever? Like, what? I don't get this. Like, they're fine with this. Like, they want to make their story or whatever. And I'm like, no, that doesn't work. You need the real thing. And I'm like, what kind of fixer are you if you can't like actually do this? This is your job. And he's like, fine, you got it, but like, don't blame me for what happens. And I'm like, all right, I think I got this, right? Like I finally like rigged the system, and like I'm real happy. And like we set up a couple meetings. Actually, this happened a few times, but like the more impactful one was, the guy came in and like I knew him like right away. Like I hated this guy and he hated me, and we sat down together, and like he just jumped on me, right? And he's like, you know what, America's horrible, and you know, all this sort of stuff, and like you're like causing terrorism here and all this stuff, and like, you know, the Trade Center was a lesson like to you, and like I'm furious like right now, like you did not go there, and like my hands are shaking and fists, and I'm about to like jump over the table and like teach this guy a lesson. And I look around, and like the eyes of the room are sort of converging on me, and I'm like, oh shit, like like I'm trapped, like, and like his friends are over there, and I see it, and I'm like, that damn fixer like set me up. And I was like, I don't, you know, I this is gonna like end horribly, you know, like the dream. And I remember the dream, and I went back and I was like, I wonder if there are certain times in this world where you can make a different decision and it will dramatically change the outcome. And I was like, all right, well, I was like, okay, well, you know, thank you. I was hoping, you know, I was expecting you. I was hoping to see this perspective. And he was like really surprised, but he was like, he was like, all right, and like he did this with his hand and like looked over his shoulder, and I was like, okay, like I don't know what just happened, but like things are like chill now. But he just starts laying on me about like, you know, this is all like America's problem, and like we are actually like the recipients of terrorism because these bombs like come out of the air and all this sort of stuff. And I'm just like, oh gosh, I just have to sit here and listen to this. And you know, he's like, it's your problem because you sent the bombs here to take out Saddam Hussein and turn this country into anarchy. And I was like, oh shit, like I feel like, you know, just jumping back and arguing with them, but I just don't like have any, like we're in the middle of a civil war, in the middle of a country that's just you know, just falling apart, and the argument won't work. So I'm like, okay, so like I was like, I'm gonna just have to take this. And I was like, I haven't considered that. And he was surprised again, but like at that point, like he wasn't really trying to convince me anymore that of his situation. And he threw a curveball on me. And you know, he's like, my brother was like one of the best people I've ever met. And growing up, he, you know, he was always the person who ended up telling me, like, you know, you should look beyond the struggle, like, be a better person, you know, just, you know, find your greater purpose. And like one day, you know, a bomb just came out of the sky and just like blew him up, and he was chopped in half, and like we couldn't even bury him. And like right then, like half of my life was just taken from me. And he was the guy who was balancing everything. And like, what would I, you know, I now take care of his wife and children and all that. And like, what kind of father would I be if I actually like, wasn't willing to sacrifice my life in order to give them a future, you know, by, well, you know. And I'm like, you continue, like what, like, and he's like, I was like, so you would blow yourself up in order to destroy what's in their heads. And he's like, well, yeah, and he looked at me, and he's like, you know, there was some kind of like, he wanted me to acknowledge that, and I'm like, I can't acknowledge this, like it was, like, but at the same time, like I don't know, like in that situation, like I might do the same thing, and I might feel the same way, like so it's like impossible to hate him. So I look down at my notes, and I'm like, I got a story to tell, and I'm like this guy. You know, this is horrible, this is disgusting, you're like trying to like kill yourself to destroy people you don't know in order to, you know, destroy what's in their heads that you perceive as like, you know, affecting your sort of, you know, your comfortable lifestyle. Like, this is disgusting. And I was like, you know what, like I need him to act, like I can't hate this guy, I can't say I've got like found hate, like you need to act like that. Like you need to like, why is he not playing his role? And I was like, you left this out there. And now's my time to pounce, right? Like he's vulnerable, and I'm gonna jump on him and make him react. And I got up in his face, and I was like, you wanna kill me? Like you wanna kill people like me? And I got up there and I was like, you're going to react to this. And he looked at me, and I saw in his right eye that he just, like, he hated me. And he shook his head, and he's like, no, not you, like, you're real. Like, and like at that point, I just didn't know what to say. And I just started crying. And we just sat there for forever. I don't know how long, minutes or whatever, just in silence. And we just, I don't know, neither of us really wanted to get up, but be the first person to get up. But we just sat there, and finally he was like, I'll go. I was like, I didn't even get your name, like, and he's like, names, just get in the way of things. I was like, well, I hope you find your peace. And he was like, I have. And he just walked out. And yeah, that's what happened.
Thank you, Brad. That was very powerful. I don't know exactly how to